Do not adjust your digital device. What you are about to see and hear may shock and appall you. Join our hosts as they encounter countless thrills, spills, chills, and hilarity as they explore the very weirdest in pop culture. The following media is so strange, so beyond the scope of what is normal, it will make you ask the question, why does this exist? Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Why Does This Exist? I'm Chris.
And I'm Rob.
And today we will be talking about probably the greatest TV show of all time. Definitely the greatest HBO TV show and series. But possibly, it's definitely up there for best drama of all time, too.
Yeah.
Best comedy would probably go to best comedy and possibly TV show also would go to Seinfeld, as we've talked about in the Seinfeld episode many moons ago. But
You can
this
make
one,
the argument that this show is also a comedy, a dark comedy.
in many ways, it
ways.
is.
Yeah.
In many ways, it is. I mean, there's a lot of. I mean, most of the quotable portions of this are like very funny lines.
Yes.
As with all mafia things, we're going to be talking about the Sopranos, of course. But if you don't know what we are, let's just do our quick spiel, and then we can actually, do the thing. So we'll try to not take up too much of your time. But this is Why Does This Exist? We are a podcast that talks about the very weirdest in pop culture, whether it be a TV show like we're about to do, a movie like we did a couple weeks ago, or just simply a weird product like we did with the Funko Pops a few weeks before that, or a musical act that did a lot of good for pop culture and was odd in its own way, like we did the last time for System of a Down. But there's a couple of ways that you could support us. Here's the easiest ones. The easiest ones to just give us money is to just go over to patreon.com/whydoesthisexist. We've always got articles popping up by our boy Tony. And you could just give us money monthly on that. As little as $1, it doesn't matter, or as much as you want. You do that, you get access to the Discord server. You can hang out with me, Rob, Tony, and whoever it is, and just chat up, see what's on the schedule, kick some ideas back and forth to us, and have a grand old time. Or you can also, if you just want to only give us money once and then leave, which is probably the best option, you could buy us coffee. That's the Patreon is patreon.com/whydoesthisexist. Buy us coffee is buymeacoffee.com/whydoesthisexist. You can also follow us possibly on social pages, but don't count on it because the bastards at Facebook and Meta have deleted my account because some jackass decided to hack me, and the people at Meta do not actually do anything and have the worst customer service on
They
it.
honestly are. I've heard that before from other people, that they are literally like the worst. And I've experienced it with the store that I used to work at. Our Facebook page we got locked out of, and to get Facebook to do anything about it was literally over a year of trying to get them to fix it. So
that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah,
they're
terrible. They're really one of the worst.
Honestly, I hope that place just burns to the ground.
I hope they go down in a Ponzi scheme.
Yes, I do hope they go down a Ponzi scheme, a big one. Billions of dollars of Ponzi scheming. Maybe they'll invest in. Maybe they invest in Tesla, and Elon Musk reveals that they're just not going to make self-driving cars, and all of that was a lie. Who knows? He's been quite erratic lately.
Yeah.
Speaking of erratic things, you can also do all of the things with our YouTube channel. That's a free way to support us. So it's youtube.com/whydoesthisexist. You will find us there, and that's where you can do all the things. Maybe you're finding us now on YouTube, and you just hit all those stupid buttons, and you move on with your day. Or you could just Send us an email at whydoesthisexistshow at gmail.com. Now I can't talk. The Neuralink has gotten to my brain and it's corrupting my speech patterns. Oh boy. Oh, and it's also downloading the data and selling it for profit because it's in my head. So now all of the weird things going on are being bought, sold by data companies just in time for Christmas.
By Data from Star Trek.
Like Data from Star Trek or Data from Indiana Jones. Anyway, why does this exist show at gmail.com? Give us your feedback, and if you own a product or company and you need somebody to hawk it for you and shill, get in touch with us there. That's the news. Here's the weather. You are now about to witness the strength of street knowledge from a ragtag group of rogues, so let's get on with the goddamn show. Rob, why don't you tell the people what exactly they're getting into? If they live under rocks, boulders, mountains, in fact,
You pretty much would have had to.
You must be living under the mountain. You've got to be,
if you haven't heard or seen Sopranos.
You've got to be that sea creature living underneath the mines of Moria to not have heard of the Sopranos.
It's probably, I would go out on a limb and say Sopranos is the number one cultural achievement of the the late 90s, early 2000s in America. Like the number one most biggest influence on American society and culture is very clearly Sopranos. In that time period, it was groundbreaking. So it was Sopranos was created by David Chase, and when he originally pitched the show to HBO, he wasn't sure what was going to happen with it because mob movies at the time were kind of like dying off. There was not a lot of like great mob movies coming out at that time. I think Analyze That came out around that time. I think that was 99 or so, or Analyze This rather. But even then, Sopranos was before that.
I think Sopranos kind of gave way to Analyze This. I don't think it would have been. I don't think it would have been. I don't think it would have been greenlit before that.
Or sure, there was some kind of lawsuit there because I think the guy who wrote Analyze This claimed that David Chase stole the idea and did it first or something. I don't know how true that is. There's always like bullshit going around like that.
I mean, you hear stuff like that all the time.
Yeah.
The elevator pitch, I could see the elevator pitch for that movie being, it's The Sopranos, but it's funny.
But see, The Sopranos is funny,
though. That's the thing. It is funny.
Especially the first couple of seasons. Like,
yeah.
There's like a marked change in the tone of The Sopranos in the later seasons. And a lot of it has to do with 9/11, I think. But the early seasons, the first three seasons specifically that were all filmed and took place before 9/11 are actually quite lighthearted for being a show about literal murderers. But anyway, so David Chase, when he pitched the show to HBO, he was not sure how it was going to do, and he wrote and filmed the pilot episode, and was expecting for HBO to not necessarily pick it up, and he was basically, what he was going to do was just write an extra hour of content and make it into a movie. Well, HBO loved it, and they picked it up, and the show premiered January 10th, 1999, and it was a huge hit for HBO. And also one of the first shows like this in like a long form show that tells a story over multiple seasons that's like a drama but with some comedy. It was like the first it wasn't for HBO's first series like this, because I think what's that, 6 Feet Under, I think, came out before this, but The Sopranos really was like the first show that really gained ground and gained traction, that like basically set the stage for every single other like drama series after, like Breaking Bad and like Sons of Anarchy, all these different drama shows that came out after Sopranos were all like directly influenced by Sopranos. Like Sopranos basically created the the hour long drama show on a premium network. Like it was basically like that. It was Sopranos.
Yeah, like
Um
this gave way to another golden age of HBO.
yes, absolutely, cuz what they have after the Oz came out after that.
Yeah,
The Wire, I don't was The Wire was on HBO, I'm pretty sure, right?
I think it was.
Yeah, like
I mean, it's on Max now, but like they could have
yes.
acquired that. But I'm pretty sure it was that The Wire was HBO.
Yeah. Uh even like to going like further down the line in the future, like I don't think Game of Thrones would be possible without The Sopranos. The Sopranos crawled so every other show after it could walk, basically. And I mean, it's just
Oh,
like a masterpiece of storytelling
oh yeah. Well,
from start
Boardwalk
to
Empire is
finish.
another one. We just started
Oh yeah,
watching that one, and that is, it's similar in some ways. It's basically The Sopranos in the 20s.
yeah. Well, I believe Boardwalk Empire was actually created by one of the main writers of The Sopranos, if I remember correctly.
I think so.
Uh, so I mean, again, like would not exist without Sopranos first,
Yep.
because that's you know it really set the stage. And like basically it was a TV show version of Goodfellas, essentially, is what it boiled down. It like a simplified like tale of Sopranos, but it was really much more than that, because the basic premise is Tony Soprano is a capo in the DeMeo crime family in New Jersey. Later, he becomes boss of the family, and basically, it tells the story of his both of his families, his actual family, his wife and his two kids, and his crime family, with of the DeMeo. So his nephew Christopher, his longtime buddy Paulie, his consigliere Dante, Silvio Dante, so it's kind of this duality between both families, and how they kind of intermingle too, because all their kids go to school together and like all know each other, and they they all call each other like, oh, it's Uncle Silvio and Uncle Paulie, blah blah blah. And that's like a big Italian thing too, I think, is just like having like aunts and uncles that aren't necessarily blood related, but it's
Oh
just
yeah,
basically,
we got a few of those.
yeah, we had those too when I was growing up. uh so but this is obviously like in a different context, because they all basically work for for Tony.
Right, and
So
that's explored later on when he comes to that realization in later seasons that
yes,
they're not really interested in anything that he has to say, but they're going
yeah,
along because they think that
they're a
that's
bunch of lackeys, basically.
yeah, that's what they think that that's what he wants to hear, or they think that that's what he needs to act like they laugh at his jokes
Yeah,
harder than actually than jokes that are funnier.
yeah.
Like and it's the first time that he really notices it. It's
Well, and that's like, again, that goes with Tony's downfall, and his his outlook from season 1 to season 6 changes so drastically. He's probably got one of the best character arcs in modern drama, period.
oh yeah.
It like, just like from where he is in season 1 to where he ends up in season 6, and like the change of personality, and just you could see it, like his like every all his hopes and dreams just slowly whittled away, and he becomes kind of like almost like this like neurotic shell of his former self, by the end of the series.
Even his voice changes,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
that actually was not intentional.
No.
There was a break in between filming for a few years, and Gandolfini had struggled with James Gandolfini, who played Tony Soprano, which we'll get to in a moment.
Hmm.
He had gone through. I want to say he went through like various substance issues,
Yes.
and he had forgotten how to do it
Yeah.
because
If there
it
was,
was a combination of time and just whatever activities he was involved with.
I think, if there was ever a role that completely consumed an actor, and then the actor kind of became the role, it was definitely Gandolfini with Tony Soprano. Obviously, he wasn't a mobster, and he wasn't like he was actually a very, very nice guy in real life. But I think he
That's what
started
they
to
say.
live the party life of a mobster, kind of like with the food and the drink and the other substances that he put in his body. You know, he kind of went down that path as Tony Soprano did a little bit. Um, and unfortunately, it led to his untimely death,
Well,
which
that's
is
whether or
one of
not
the
that was intentional. I mean, it could have just been life imitating art.
yeah. No, I think that's probably and I think the fact that he was the biggest TV star possibly of all time really got to, his head,
Oh
because
yeah. I mean,
he was the like you couldn't go 2 feet in the like mid 2000s without seeing Tony Soprano's or James Gandolfini's face either on like making cameos on different TV shows or commercials or billboards everywhere. Like
oh
The
yeah. Well,
Sopranos was the cultural phenomenon of the 2000s.
especially for us living in like New York and New Jersey,
Yes.
that was because I mean that's where it takes place. That's also
Yes.
where a lot of where like most of the real life mafia things occurred. Like I
Yes.
know where a few things happened. I lived in a neighborhood where it wasn't far from things happening. I knew where, and some things happened in that neighborhood that I knew of, and many that I probably have no idea.
Hmm.
But it's just interesting in that point. But I remember if anyone's ever been to John's Deli, which the best roast beef sandwich you'll ever get, they've they subscribe to like mafia magazines, or if you've even gone to a cigar store, you'll see you'll still see magazines with the Sopranos on it or
Hmm.
something to do with the Sopranos in there. But you would see that, but like in John's Deli, they have a bunch of um just signed photos on the wall of the Sopranos cast members, and like the photo, and it's not like 8x10s like like where you go into one place and they have like a forged 8x10, or they have like an 8x10 of some random celebrity from like eBay that they bought and they put on the wall to make it look like famous people eat there.
Hmm.
This place has pictures of the cast members of The Sopranos sitting down at the same tables eating the roast beef sandwiches.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm sure they got a lot catered from them because they filmed in a lot of those
Yeah.
areas.
They probably did. And you know, like there's always a funny story of like, like James Gandolfini used to say like mob bosses used to call him and tell him like how like accurate his portrayal was. They would tell him like not to do this or to do this and stuff like that because I guess, it was like it became such a cultural phenomenon. Everyone was like talking about it. And I think mafia stories have always been like a huge like thing in America. Like, The Godfather, Goodfellas, Casino, like all these mafia stories are huge. Everyone knows them. Everyone's seen those movies. They're classics. And just to have a TV show that was like as good as great as Sopranos was and how well written it was. Because I think that's really the thing is that Sopranos could have premiered, and if the writing wasn't there, it could have been like mediocre at best. But it was
Yes.
such a well written and well acted. Like, I mean, you watch James Gandolfini and Edie Falco together, and they like in multiple episodes put on acting clinics. Like,
Oh yeah.
if you're in acting school, watch The Sopranos because you're gonna like learn how to act. Like in the season 4 finale, Whitecaps. I mean, like it's just like the dynamic is just so amazing. And Robert Eiler, who played AJ, the Tony's son, AJ, um, had said that he would sit on set and watch them act because he wanted to like learn and like just like how great. I mean, everything about this show is just like top notch. You know,
Yes. I mean, well, that was what made it work was not only the acting but the accuracy,
yes,
because that's one of the things that it was so praised for was not just the mafia part of it, but also but also from the psychiatrist's point
yes,
of view, like that part was praised heavily just of how accurate it is, where he's seeing Dr. Melfi, who we
yeah,
haven't even started, but that's
yes,
basically where it starts is he's not only he's not just a mafia like he's not even like a guy who's high up in the mafia. He's seeing a therapist, which at the time and possibly might still be now. I don't know. I've heard that a lot of the rules have changed over
Yeah.
the years. Like they don't even like you could be a boss. Like I've heard that you could be a boss and you don't have to be full blooded Italian
No, you could
anymore.
be. I think because so many like there's really no full blooded Italians around anymore. There's not a lot, at least because
Yeah.
America is the great melting pot. So I
Well,
think
also all of the
as long as you
true
have 50% Italian heritage and you can actually trace your ancestors back to the old country, then you're like okay to be made or something,
wow,
basically.
that's what it is. Not a boss, but made.
Yeah. Well, I mean, eventually a made
But
man
I
can
mean,
become
you
the
would
boss, technically.
that this is true. I mean, I don't know. I don't follow the mafia, so I don't know if they already have a boss like that or anything. But yeah, I mean, you can imagine. Like, I remember reading about The Godfather and how Francis Ford Coppola wanted, like, he reached out to mob guys to to get accuracy, and at first they really didn't want to do it, and then eventually like one gave in, and then it was okay. But for Sopranos, I think it's funny how like the shoes on the other foot, where like the mob guys are calling the actors and they're just
Yeah.
like with
Well,
like
it was a
all of these
different time
tips.
also. When The Godfather came out was the
It
70s.
was
Like the mafia was still
very
widely
much in
on.
power.
Yeah, and like the whole the omerta was like still like very strictly enforced. Like
Yeah,
in the eyes of the mafia didn't exist, you know.
yeah,
Uh
exactly.
you didn't talk about you know this thing of ours at all. Like at all. So that's why I think it was the only people that would really probably like Coppola probably was able to get were people that were already like, state's evidence basically.
Yeah, something of that nature.
Yeah.
But but like But I think it's just funny that James Gandolfini would just be like sitting around in his house or something, and then the phone he'd get a call from like an unlisted number or whatever. He'd pick it up, and it would just be like, and you just get a guy on the other end, just like, hey, I whacked this guy into the bridge the other day, and you know, y this never happened, by the way, but let's just say that I whacked some guy by the bridge the other day. We did it at like 11:30 at night, but then there were like three people that saw this, and then we had to chase them down. Two of them got away, and then one of them we just sent them on a bus to Albuquerque. You think you could put that in the show? Like, I feel like he got conversations like that every now and
I'm
then.
sure he did. Um so like I guess we kind of like got ahead of ourselves a little bit. Like
We did.
Tony is like we said it starts out in the first season he's just a capo in in the family, which is for those who don't know is a captain basically. He's like management but not upper management. And throughout the first season he kind of like slowly like kind of positions himself to be boss of the family um by stepping over his uncle Junior, who is played by Dominic Chianese, who like puts out again like every single actor is just like top of their game and it like so good. And the first episode, Tony is having a barbecue and he ends up passing out and finds out that he has panic attacks. And so, once they can't find anything physically wrong with him, the doctors recommend that he go see a psychiatrist and enter Dr. Melfi, um, who is possibly in some ways Tony's other wife.
Yeah.
Because, like if that's where like really Melfi's the only woman in his life that he's probably like not 100% open with, but more open certainly than Carmela or any of his gumas. Uh,
He's also one of the he's also one of the few women that he's come on to that have rejected his
yes,
advances.
yes, yeah,
Even though even though she has some kind of a thing for him too.
yes. But yeah, she keeps that professionalism and doesn't actually pursue it. And there is like a dynamic there because Dr. Melfi also sees the therapist, and a lot of their conversation has to do with the fact that Melfi probably gets some kind of like thrill from talking to Tony, because she kind of gets a look into mafia life without actually, being a part of the mafia life,
Yeah.
So, uh, throughout the first season, we see Tony's dynamic. We see, he's raising two teenage kids, so, but also trying to run the New Jersey, and the whole like running gag throughout the whole series, but like very prominently in the first season, is that Tony is not in the mafia. There is no mafia. He is a waste management consultant.
Right. Which, what does
Which
that even mean?
exactly. Basically, he is like I said, a consultant for Barone Sanitation, which is basically just his W-2, like so he could show that he has legitimate income, and
Yeah, it's a bullshit shell company.
exactly, yeah. But it is a real sanitation company in the show, but it is 100% run by the mafia. Like
Yeah.
they own the routes, and that's like that kind of like goes into like it's interesting because it goes into a lot of like mafia business and how it works, and like the construction rackets and the garbage routes and stuff like that, and how they make their money legitimately, to show that they have income, uh so that they can have like the W-2, and because Tony lives in a fucking mansion, which the two of us have both been to.
Yes, we
uh
have. What a
and
great day that was.
yeah, it was. And it's like, if he's like not showing any legitimate income, they would friggin' throw him in jail like in 3 seconds. So,
Of course.
he has to have some kind of legitimate income to like show that, yeah, he can afford this.
Yeah. I mean, we do see that the feds obviously like know that he's up to something and they
Yeah,
try to get him quite a few times.
yeah. And Tony is very much the Teflon Don in this show. There, like pretty much every attempt by the FBI to foil him and like build a case against him ends up getting like screwed basically until the end of the show, and then finally they like it's hinted that they've built up enough that they're gonna indict him. In the final episode, Tony's lawyer basically says there's like an 80 to 90% chance he'll be indicted on a RICO case, which for those who don't know, the RICO predicates, it was an act of Congress that allowed basically the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act is an act of Congress that allows uh like the head of criminal organizations to be prosecuted for things that they had nothing to do directly with necessarily, but they ordered. So they use RICO to go after like mafia bosses who are, that like give orders for people to die, and give orders to do this and that and that, and didn't necessarily, dirty their hands themselves, but they still have to be prosecuted. So uh that's another like running theme throughout the show, is that the FBI is trying to build a RICO case against Tony. They already have one against his uncle Junior, who ends up getting arrested in the season finale of season 1. And in season 2, we found out Uncle Junior gets out on a medical because he has heart problems. So they basically put him on house arrest, and Tony keeps him as boss of the family. So in the end of of season 1, there's a war between Tony and Junior for the position of boss. And the Sopranos, like in general, had been waiting a long time to become boss of the family. Tony's father was a capo in the family. His uncle, like I said, going back into like the 50s and 60s, and so they're trying to like position themselves, but they never really got the chance. The boss when the series starts is Jackie Aprile, who has cancer, who was actually based on a real New Jersey mafia boss who died of cancer and caused like a power struggle within his own family. So at the end
The
of season
whole
1,
Well, the whole April line is cursed.
yes, it is
Which
like
when we get to the end of the season, they off when we get to the end of the series, they offer fan favorite and Tony's right hand. Well, I guess you could say his middle finger man, Paulie Walnuts,
yeah.
the to be head of the April family, and he's just like I don't want this because
It's
everybody,
cursed. Everyone who's ever been a
yeah,
captain of the Brill crew got like died or something in some way.
yeah. Like they meet horrible demises, so he's like, no thanks.
Yeah.
Which we'll get to Paulie in a minute, but I will say, like, the most interesting part of his arc is he's the only old guy there. So he's
Yes.
like, he comes off like an idiot, but he's a lot smarter than anyone than people give him credit for
Yeah, he
because
really is.
he's learned how to survive the whole lifestyle. And
Y-
he points out little things like he never had a family, he never settled down, he never got married because all that shit ties you to like to something or like it's
yes.
something that they could like or it's like leverage that they could use against you at some point or
Right.
another. So
Which they do.
he's yeah, which and we see it several times in the
Yes.
series. So he figured it out and he played the game right. It's a lonely life, but he's alive at the end of
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Uh, Possibly the only one that's still alive at the end of it, but we'll get into that.
Yeah.
Um, Tony ends up winning this little power struggle between him and his Uncle Junior and becomes boss. And then when Junior gets out of jail, Tony keeps him as boss of the family. So originally he puts Junior up as boss to like kind of because like it avoids the war. Tony's still really in control. Junior's kind of just like a boss in name only. And then so like he could take the hits, which he does. He's the one that gets arrested when the FBI comes knocking at the end of season 1. So Tony, when his Uncle Junior goes to jail, just takes over and becomes boss. But when Junior gets out, he's like, all right, well, here's the deal. You could still earn and you're going to be on house arrest, but you're going to be boss basically in name only. You're just going to be there to take the hits. I'm going to run everything and I'm going to control most of like the income, you know?
Sure.
So and from that point on, Tony is like the boss. Like, you know, again, they refer to Junior as boss, and Junior even says that several times. I'm still boss of this family, even, you know, but he really has no power, basically.
And he
Uh,
knows that. Like Junior
yes,
has a lot of insecurities.
yes, he does. He is probably one of the most insecure characters ever in he's another one that never got married and never had kids, and you know is like this old bitter old man basically. Uh, and constantly schemes against his nephew, even
Yeah.
though he's like has no power. Basically, like from season 1 on, he's like first he's scheming with Tony's mother Livia, who's another character that is like, you know, just a great like amazing character, who's like very clear like borderline personality and like is like just awful and like caused a lot of like Tony's problems throughout life is like how bad she was as a mother basically.
Yeah, and
Um
she's partially based on David Chase's mother.
yes. David Chase actually also suffered panic attacks and major depression when he was growing up. So like a
Ah.
lot of like he put a lot of his life into this story.
Well,
And
what's interesting is his original vision for the show was going to be more of Tony's hallucinations and dream sequences. Like
yes.
he wanted it to be more like Twin Peaks,
Yeah.
and where like I guess his original idea was Tony would go to like it would just be at the psychiatrist's office, so he would sit down for his regular meeting. He would talk about what was going on, and then we would kind of drift off into the dream world, and we would see like these really out there variations of what happened.
Mhm.
And HBO just kind of liked the idea of just a mafia guy goes to a therapist and didn't really care for the hallucination part.
Yeah. Which I think kind of worked because they still had the episodes where Tony has dreams. There's several episodes where we go into Tony's dreams and like the dream sequences are actually very well done and like use a lot of like psychological like
They're some of
references.
my favorite parts of the show.
Yeah, they really are really good. And not like over the top. Like they like make sense for the context of what's going on in Tony's life at the time. So they really work well to tell, you know, a story and kind of like show Tony's inner monologue, you know, and what he's thinking. Most notably in the season two finale, Tony, you know, is like constantly thinking that his best friend Big Pussy is a government informant, which he is, and like really the dreams kind of help him confirm that basically. Like, he has a dream where he's talking to a fish, and the fish is big pussy, and and the fish is basically like, I've been working with the government, right, Tone? And Tony doesn't want to believe it, but he knows it's true. And then knows what he has to do, because he goes like, see these two guys next to me, they're sleeping. So basically he's sleeping with the fishes. He knows he has to
Yeah.
whack big pussy at that point.
Yeah.
um but again, the whole episode pretty much, except for the very beginning and the very end, is a whole dream sequence, and it just works so well, to like kind of show like what Tony is thinking. And it's funny because he's having a fever dream because he has like severe food poisoning, and like just keeps having these like crazy like moments and stuff, but like it all like kind of comes together, and he realizes what he has to do. um so like again, they just, it's such great storytelling. And spoiler alert, season 6, in the beginning of season 6, Tony gets shot by Junior. And
But at this
he's
point, Junior, well, one of the other, just to back up a little bit, one of the other things that happens is, in complete irony, Junior tries to beat his indictment and prison sentence by, because they try to do it anyway.
Yes.
They try to indict him and everything, and he tries to beat it by saying that he's in a cognitive decline and has a deteriorating mental state. So they go with it, and he gets off, so he doesn't go to jail. But in a complete act of irony, his character later on does experience this cognitive decline
Yes.
very badly, where
Yes.
at the end of the series, he doesn't even know who Tony is.
No.
Like, he just knows that he used to play baseball with him, but he has no idea anything else.
Yeah, he becomes completely like, like super like Alzheimer's, like doesn't know anything. And and at the beginning of season 6, that's like, even he's like already like really bad, and he shoots Tony because he thinks that Tony is his old enemy, Pussy Malanga. And so Tony ends up in a coma, and the coma sequences are like just like amazing. Tony imagines that he's like, uh he's not a mafia boss anymore. He actually sells precision optics for the military, and he's trying to like get into like this like military technology conference in like Arizona or something, and loses his briefcase and has an ID that says that he's Kevin Finnerty, and like doesn't know if he's actually Kevin Finnerty or not. And again, it all goes along with Tony now being in a coma and not knowing where he's going in life, because he might be dying. Like he's like, so while this is all happening, in the dream sequence of him being Kevin Finnerty, like he's literally fighting for his life in a hospital bed. And it kind of just all like intermingles. Like, we see what's happening in real life, and then we see what's happening in Tony's coma dream. And it's just, it's crazy how everything links together, and it's all like based on Tony's psyche, and how he's like declined so much because of his, like, he really, his depression just gets worse and worse over the seasons, and he becomes more and more just like bleak on everything. It gets more of like a terrible outlook. And there's a little ray of hope after he gets shot and he comes out of it. Like, he kind of like thinks, oh, every day is a gift. But even then, it like that like rapidly goes away, and he goes right back to like being like just like shitty, and like wallowing in his own self-pity
Well,
and stuff.
he ends up just getting worse,
Yeah.
and he really starts making a lot of huge mistakes.
Becomes a degenerate gambler, and
Yeah.
like just, which is something that he never did throughout the series. Because his father always told him, like when he was a kid, never gamble. And just like, you really see like he just like starts to like let go of everything, especially like as he gets more insights into his childhood and how like his father was a shitty person too, and a shitty parent. Like, and he starts to like question his like everything that he kind of was brought up with, because like, wow, not only was my mother a shitty parent, but also my father, who I looked up to, was really shitty. Like, because he was also in the mafia and like was abusive and a piece of shit. And it's like, well, what am I now? I'm literally him, so now I'm a piece of shit, kind of thing. It's there's a whole psychological thing going there, which is like so deep and goes so like, it like goes throughout the whole series too. It's not like, oh, okay, this is only like one season and then something else happens. It's like, no, this is like a constant like thing throughout the series. We see Tony's like get more and more insight into what causes his panic attacks and his depression. And then he realizes it's like, it was the way he was brought up. Yeah, maybe there is some kind of like genetic component to it, but really it was his shitty childhood that turned him
Yeah.
into the man he was. And, I think he becomes such an empty shell by the end that it's like he doesn't even really realize. Like there's a pretty, and this is another thing, like Seinfeld, like always like coming full circle. There's a scene in the first season, in the last episode of the first season, where they're trapped in a storm and they end up going to Vesuvio, which is like their local restaurant that they always go to. And, the owner is Artie, who's Tony's best friend from high school, and, or one of his best friends from high school. And
The guy
probably,
is a chump.
he's a chump, but he's probably actually only one of Tony's only actual friends, because
Yes.
he's not involved with Artie wants to be involved with the mafia life. He like is desperate to be Tony Soprano, but he's a chump. He's a loser, and he's a civilian. So he's one of like the only people that Tony is actually like friends with that isn't a lackey. And
also one of the few survivors of the show.
yes. So they go to the restaurant in season 1. Is again, this is like their family restaurant that they love, and and Tony looks around at his kids and the power's out and they're just sitting there eating by candlelight, and he's like if you're lucky you'll remember the good times like this. And then at the end of the series, they're all in Holston's, which is another restaurant that they all go to. It's a diner in, I believe, Montclair. And they're all sitting there, and AJ's kind of complaining about his new job, and he goes like, "Yeah, or I guess remember the good times, right?" And like Tony's like, "What do you mean?" And he's like, "Isn't that what you said? Remember the good times." And Tony doesn't even remember that he said that, because he can't remember the good times anymore. He's become such an empty husk at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So it like just the development of his character over the 6 seasons is just like so great. And all the characters, really, they all have great arcs. Like Christopher and Christopher is another character who has severe like issues, because he starts out kind of like just like this young kid trying to learn the mafia life, and then ends up being made very young for because he's like 30 something and he gets made, which is like very young, and then like slowly descends into a drug addict, like, and becomes severely addicted to heroin and alcohol, and cleans himself up and then goes back to it, and then cleans himself up, because it's constantly a struggle for him. And again, he's another one that just spirals.
At the time, you really didn't see a whole lot of that on TV either.
Right.
Like I can't really think of any shows that wasn't like a cop show where they even spoke about heroin addiction.
Yeah, and
let alone presented the entire thing on TV.
Yeah, and so well done too. Like Christopher is like Michael Imperioli, who plays Christopher, does such a great job acting as a heroin addict, and like doing all like the typical things like the nodding off and all that, and it's just
I mean, even in the comedic way, when he kills his girlfriend Adriana's dog, Cosette, where he's just like zonked out on heroin, and he just like sits on the dog and crushes her. He doesn't realize, and he like never gets up, never acknowledges what's going on because he's way too stoned until she comes home and like moves him from the couch, and he doesn't even know.
Which leads to one of my favorite lines of the series during his intervention, where Tony goes, "You suffocated little Cosette." Or no, he's like, "You killed little Cosette. I had to suffocate you, you little prick." It's just so fucking... Christopher's intervention is one of those scenes which is like, it's supposed to be like a, obviously like a deep, like, very heavy scene, because he's like, they're trying to like get him to like stop killing himself with drugs. And is like so inadvertently like hilarious, like just like everything, like Paulie's statement and like Silvio, and it just is so funny. They make light of these dark situations, and that's constant throughout the whole series. So I mean, there's an argument that it's a drama, but it's also kind of a black comedy, The Sopranos, like, because they make light and they do it so well of all these like really heavy topics, and it just works.
Yeah. I mean, like you see it throughout you just see it throughout the whole series. It's
Yes.
like there's nothing, even if it's something like terribly tragic as the intervention or something, or even a funeral or anything, there's
Yes.
always like someone always has some quip where it just makes the whole moment hysterical,
Yeah.
no matter how bleak it is.
Yeah, it's just there's always something that somebody says that like freaking like it's just like okay, it's like it was clearly like a punchline basically, like
Yeah,
uh
like and like that's why it's done so well because you don't realize that all of this is just such a crazy setup. I mean, the
yeah,
whole show is a big setup for what comes at the end, but we'll talk about that in a little bit.
yeah,
I mean, it's hard like we're 45 minutes in and it's like it's hard to really try to like fit this show into like a 1 or 2 hour bubble. Like there's so much to
yeah,
get into.
yeah. Like you could literally go and people have gone an hours long deep dives into the show. Actually, there is another podcast called Talking Sopranos, which features Michael Imperioli, who played Christopher Moltisanti, and Steve Sciarippa, who played Bobby Bacala on The Sopranos, and they literally go on an episode by episode basis and analyze every single episode of the show. So
Yeah.
I think it's like
I
1 to
think
2
they
hour long episodes that
I
they
think they
do.
ended
So
it in 2021 or something like that, but
yes,
it was really good.
yeah.
I mean,
So
if you want to show Sopranos to anybody, like just like the one like the go-to episode is probably Pine Barrens.
yes, Pine Barrens is the quintessential Sopranos episode, and it's kind of like self-contained. Like there's not too much going on that you need to know from like other seasons or like earlier in season 3 to like know what's going on in Pine Barrens. It is like the quintessential like perfect like self-contained Sopranos episode, and it is one of the best episodes, and
Yeah.
actually directed by Steve Buscemi, who would later go on to star as Tony Blundetto, Tony Soprano's cousin,
Yes.
in season 5. And again, like just like the star-studded cast in this, like Steve Buscemi and like everybody who's probably was in either Casino or Goodfellas has made an appearance in Sopranos, basically.
Yeah. Well, and Sopranos ended up its it transcends its own show to the point where you were getting Steve Sciarippa and oh god, what the hell is Paulie Walnut's real name? What was his real
Oh,
name?
Tony Sirico.
Yes, Tony Sirico. There you go.
Yeah.
Where you get the two of them on Sesame Street,
Yes.
like just like walking Bert and Ernie through like a scene, or like Bert and Ernie are directing them to be Bert and Ernie, and they're doing like they're still in their like mafia gimmicks.
Yeah, and I think Gandolfini was on an episode of Sesame Street too.
He was. They got everybody from The
Yes.
Sopranos on Sesame
Well,
Street
and again, it just shows what
eventually.
a cultural phenomenon it was. Like that they were like, it's a children's TV show, and they have guys from The Sopranos on it. Like what?
Yeah.
So, uh, and Tony Sirico was actually an associate in I think the
Yes.
Colombo family when he was a youth. So like he knew the life. And actually one of his one of his requests when he took the role of Paulie Walnuts was that Paulie could never be a rat. That was like his one request. He never wanted Paulie to be a rat because that was like it went against everything that he believed in. Because Tony Sirico was 100%. He was in the mafia. Like
Yeah.
and he never like became like turned state's evidence. Like he got out of the mafia because he became an actor, but he didn't like, and he went to jail and he did his time. Like he didn't like like rat on anybody. He didn't flip. He went to jail. He did his time and he got out and became an actor.
Yeah.
So he actually started acting in prison. That's when he like I think like started like to get the acting bug.
That I
And
didn't know.
yeah, and or he was visited by an acting troupe while he was in prison, and it really got him to like get into that. And I think it kind of probably saved his life in real life because how many of those guys either end up dead or in prison for the rest of their lives.
Yeah. Well, especially like guys like him, where I don't know if he would. I don't know how high up he would have even gotten There's and even so, like
Yeah, I don't think
how
he was made. I think he was just an associate in the family.
yeah, so he at least had I guess he at least was in the position where you could get out if you really were like if you had like the proper blessing, you could get out. But
Yeah,
also like how many of those associate guys, a lot of them are patsies. So
well,
like they'll just go to jail for somebody else
yeah,
higher up.
yeah. Well, and that's the whole thing with RICO, and why they
Yeah,
created the RICO Act is because that would happen.
right.
So, eh, I don't even know where we were. Like, it's there's just so much to go over with this show. It's just like
We're talking about Pine Barrens as Steve Sirico and not Steve Sirico and Tony Sirico, and we were talking about just talking Sopranos and trying to analyze everything
yes,
really.
yeah. It's you really. I mean, it makes sense that they had a whole podcast to analyze because there is so much to analyze in Sopranos that we can't do it all in one episode or like it would we would have to do like a whole show just on Sopranos if we wanted to
Right.
like
I mean,
do it.
there's entire YouTube channels dedicated to Sopranos.
Yes.
Like there's it's impossible to contain this into an hour or even
Yeah.
two
No.
or
We're
even three.
we're
Like
basically
even
just giving you an overview, like a very very light overview. If you really want to deep dive into Sopranos, like go look at from one of those YouTube videos or go listen to the Talking Sopranos podcast because like there's just so much to go over with this show. It is like it is such a huge like just like giant uh I don't even know what the word is, it's just like such a like iconoclast, I guess, like just huge, like and there's so much to go over in it and so it's so deep and so well written it like it's just impossible to like just talk about it like in depth in any kind of depth on a show like ours, like this kind of format. So we're just trying to give you an overview of like how the show is and how great it is. And like, hopefully anybody listening, if you haven't seen it, you gotta go watch Sopranos. It is like number one, the show. Like if there's any show you have to watch, that you're looking for a show to binge watch, Sopranos should be like at the top of the list because it is amazing. It is one of the best shows ever made. Um,
yeah, we're
it-
doing our best, folks.
yeah, it
We're
really
doing
like,
we're doing our best. This is essentially the Sopranos for dummies,
yeah.
is what we're trying to do. Um, But yeah, I mean, we haven't even gotten to the other members of Tony's family, and we're not even talking about like his mafia guys, which we've like still have to get into on that too.
Yes.
But like we've got his kids, we've got his dysfunctional sister Janice who comes in
Oh
to
yeah.
see in season 2, and she's a riot in herself because
Yeah.
she also is constantly scheming in her own way, and
Yes.
she has this weird thing where she sleeps with she sleeps with the other mob guys that like Tony's suddenly becoming like friendlier around,
Yes.
or the ones that he develops some sort of an affinity to.
She basically no.
She
Well,
starts sleeping with them. It's
she sleeps
weird.
with the people who thinks will get her some kind of like power or
Yes.
like somewhere in life because she ends up sleeping with Richie. Like her first boyfriend, husband, fiance, whatever is Richie Aprile, who gets released from prison in season 2, and he's like one of the old school guys that like came up and was like one of the guys that Tony looked up to. But now that Tony's boss, Richie doesn't like want to like take orders from him because like, he knows Tony as this kid that, that kid, this kid that looked up to him. So, Richie kind of like starts to go his own way a little bit, and Janice latches onto that
Right.
because Janice had like already dated him at one point in the past. And
Richie also assumes that he should just be the boss instantaneously
yeah,
because Jackie Aprile was his brother.
exactly. And time served and all that, like, oh, I was in prison, so now I like should be like, I did my time and I kept my mouth shut, so that should
Right.
be worth
And
something.
he schemes with Junior to try to get it to happen, but Junior
Yeah,
really has no power, like we said.
right. And then Junior realizes that he's better off with Tony as boss because if Richie's just not cut out to be boss.
Right. He's
You
just
know,
too unstable.
he's
It's really the whole like Frankie Bean situation.
he's too unstable. He has no support from like the other capos. Like it's just so that's Junior basically like rats out Richie to Tony. Is like, yeah, he's gonna whack you. And before Tony could actually do anything about it, Janice shoots Richie
which is
because
one of the most shocking moments of the series.
yes, because like he hits her, it's a whole thing, and like Janice is just as like neurotic and crazy as Tony and her mother is, so she just grabs a gun and shoots him, and Tony has to just get rid of the body.
Well, the other thing is the look on Tony's face when he comes into her house and realizes what happened.
Yeah,
Because he doesn't give you the like this his facial expressions really like help give you a look on the character. Like because there's always a sibling rivalry, and this is just another thing that he can hold over her. So instead of just saying, "Oh my God, what happened?" or being compassionate or just like trying to like comfort his sister, he has this look of glee on his face, just like you got to be kidding. This is the
did
best
my
day of
job
my
for me.
life.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's
exactly.
like, this is the best day of my life. He's like, the guy who wanted to kill me is dead, and my sister's humiliated. What a win!
One of my favorite
Like,
parts too is like he calls Christopher and Furio, who's Furio is a soldier that he gets in an exchange from Italy. So Furio's actually from Italy, and he gets it in like this like business deal. Like Furio comes over in exchange for a deal on these stolen cars with the Italian boss. So they come. So Christopher and Furio walk in the back door, and they see him on the floor. And Tony's like, get rid of him, and here, take his car and bring it to the scrapyard or whatever to get like, to crushed. And Furio's only reaction is like Cadillac, damn, like basically like he's like, oh, not the fact that like this guy that it was like a capo in the family is lying there dead on the floor, but the fact that he's gonna like trash a Cadillac. It's just, one of the inadvertently funny lines in this series that just like makes light of this like heavy situation. The fact that they just like Janice just murdered somebody and now they're trying to get rid of the body. Like,
yeah, and all this guy could think about is does it have to be this type of car?
exactly.
Like, couldn't it have been a Honda?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So
And then
yeah,
you,
it's just
and then
like,
and while we're on the subject of Apriles, you also have we'll get to Furio in a little bit too, but while we're on the subject of Apriles, you also get Richie. You also get right? No, not Richie. Who the hell is the other guy? Joe Pants plays him. I'm so bad with these names.
yeah, it's uh Ralphie.
Ralphie. There you go.
Yeah.
Who this is pretty much Joe Pantolilo's like most iconic role as well, and he and one of it. This character is interesting because he gets more interesting when he's dead.
Yeah.
Like you learn which that doesn't really happen for any other character on the show. He but Ralphie's a real degenerate. Like
Yes.
we're pretty much first introduced to like what kind of a like maniac he is right away. Is Jackie's his brother or his cousin?
No, he's not related to Jackie.
Or he's just heading the April family and he has
Yeah.
nothing to do with it.
Yeah,
Oh no, that's right, because
he just becomes like the cap. Well, first, in season 3, after like Richie's killed, Tony ends up putting another guy, Gigi, in charge of the April crew, because he wants someone over there that can control the April crew and like will kind of keep them in line, and he can actually like get information from like Gigi about them. And we're also introduced to Ralph at the same time, and Ralphie is unhappy about that because he's the top earner in the April crew. He was actually in Florida. That's why he lives in Miami normally, but he comes back to New Jersey after Richie died to kind of try to take over the April crew. And he's like literally the top earner in that crew, and he's like very upset that he got passed over. And so he kind of becomes like the antagonist of season 3 because of the like tension between him and Tony, because he got passed over to be the capo of the crew because he is like a loose cannon again. Like it just like all the capos of the April crew just end up being loose cannons. basically.
Yeah, the whole thing really is cursed. Like it just gets the same cycle of behavior in that crew, which makes you wonder what kind of a boss Jackie Aprile was, because we
Yeah.
never really get to see that. I mean,
I mean,
apparently
everybody
he
seems to
is very,
say that Jackie was a good boss, and like
yes,
if
he's
he had
very
not
well
had cancer,
respected.
yeah, if he had not had cancer, like who knows, he probably would have like been boss like for a long time because everyone seemed to respect him and like him a lot.
Right.
Even Tony was like willing to have Jackie as boss and like and be
Well,
his underling.
he was his best friend, so he
Yes,
knew that everything was going to like be great underneath him.
yeah,
So he wouldn't have really had to do much of anything.
right. Yeah, so it's.
But well, the world may never know. Just like how many licks it takes to get to the center of a Tootsie Pop.
Yeah,
But with Ralphie, he's a total nut job, and
yes,
he has a lot of really crazy psychological trauma, as we end up hearing through his girlfriends and love interests, because he has all these very bizarre fetishes that none of them understand, and
yeah,
it's like you even hear Janice, who Janice ends up sleeping with him too. Janice also ends up sleeping with members of the April crew.
yes,
Another odd pattern.
yeah,
Um, uh,
and they all end up dead too.
well, yeah, everybody Janice dates dies, so that's also another pattern.
Yeah, it is a really weird pattern. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, I think Bobby Bacala is like the only guy in the April crew that
he's not in the April crew.
I meant to say he's the only guy that she sleeps with that is not in the April crew
Yeah,
throughout the show. But well, also, oh no, wait, no, there's that guy, there's that weird narcolepsy guy that she dates
oh yeah, yeah,
too at the beginning.
yeah.
He also one of the few survivors.
Have you heard the good news? He has risen.
Anyway, so Ralphie also being a maniac, we hear from his girlfriends and his like odd, like he's also extremely insecure. But we hear about his weird fetishes, and he ends up sleeping with Jackie April's widow, who we'll talk about all the women in The Sopranos at another point, because they also were written very well and very interesting in their own rights. Um, but he ends up sleeping with her, and he kind of mentors. He kind of almost tries to mentor Jackie Jr., but Jackie Jr. is
Yeah,
just an idiot.
yeah,
So there's really not any hope to what's there, and he almost kind of helps him dig his own, he basically digs his own grave for him, and Jackie Aprile ends up misinterpreting every bit of advice that he's trying to give him, because Jackie Jr. Is obsessed with wanting to be in the mafia,
yeah,
where everyone else is trying to push him away from it because they know this is just not going to work out for him very well, and he takes Richie Aprile's Richie Aprile is. Why do I keep saying it? He's not Richie. Ralphie. He keeps
yeah,
he keeps Ralphie keeps giving him advice, just like basically, if you want to get in here, you got to make a statement. You can't just ask. You have to, you got to show them that you're serious. And he's like, well, what do you mean? And he just uses it as an example of like, well, your father and your uncle Tony went in and they broke up Feats Lamanna's card game, and they robbed a card game, and when people found out, they didn't do anything to them. They actually took them seriously and they let them in, where because they showed that they had balls. And he interprets this to, you should you should do the exact same thing with all your idiot friends, and the same thing will happen to you, instead of just, just try to get in and just, get noticed. Instead, he just goes and does this, and he botches it completely because he's an idiot,
yeah.
and he ends up dying over it.
Yeah, they end up like getting in a shootout with made guys. They shoot at made guys, and here's the difference: is like, Tony's card game knockoff like went very well. They got the money, and then like like Feach was pissed. Feach was a made man, and it was a big deal. But that no one died, and they gave some of the money back. And you know what? That showed okay, they got balls, right?
Right,
And
like they pretty like they did like they just did it to say, "Hey, listen, you should take us seriously and let us in."
yeah,
And they kind
Jackie's
of gave that and they gave the money back as like a peace offering.
yes. And Jackie and his friends, they completely botch it. They get in a shootout. They kill the dealer. They fucking shoot at Chris. They shoot at Furio, who are both made guys. So that's a big no-no. And it causes a huge issue because, like, they completely botched it and like just bumbled through it. And I think a big part of it is that they do drugs before, like they even like one of his, what was it, Dino, one of the guys in the crew says like, oh, let's do it before the crank wears off, so they're all hopped up on friggin' crank, and then they go in and like friggin' have like full on like just like, oh, like this huge thing, and like cause a whole huge scene, and then shoot the guy, and it's a whole thing. They just completely botch the whole thing, and it makes them look like not only like idiots but completely disrespectful, and like, again, loose cannons. They're a liability, so they end up getting whacked.
Yep.
So yeah, and it's again, like, Tony knows it's Ralphie's fault because he even says like, they have a sit down later on because Jackie escapes and he's in hiding, and Tony kind of like implies like, yeah, Ralph, you got to take care of this. He's like, he's always like, oh, whatever happens, it's your decision. You're the capo of that crew, and whatever happens, like, you just got to make sure it's the right decision, and he kind of like hint, wink, wink, like, you got to kill this kid now,
Yeah.
which is messed up because he's dating the kid's mom. So
Yeah.
and Tony obviously doesn't want to do it himself because it's his best friend's kid, so it's a really great, season 2 and 3 are probably my two favorite seasons, I think.
Yeah. My favorite is 2.
Yeah, two is great. 3 is also good. Well, the other ones are okay too. It's like there's not really there's no bad season of Sopranos. It's just like ones that are lesser than the others.
There's a really bad lull in season 6 though. So
I disagree.
Well, the issue that I have with 6B is that it feels like it's a completely different show for like a third of the season. So like season 6A is great. Season 6B is really good until Tony comes out of the coma. And then it gets really bad for a long time until maybe the last 3 episodes.
See, I disagree. I think season 6 is it's not terrible. I think
season 6 is more about Phil and the old guard coming back.
Well, yeah, and so season 6A is the first tools up. The original plan, actually, season 5 was supposed to be the last episode of Sopranos, or the last season of Sopranos, and it was going to end with Tony killing Tony B, because Tony B went off the reservation and caused a whole like problem with the New York family,
right?
And it was just going to end at that, and that was like going to be it. That was going to be the end of the series, and Chase had no intention of making another season. HBO came to him and convinced him, like, look, you got to do another season. Like, you're on top of the world. Like, this is like the best show ever. Like, do one more season. So Chase came back and did one more season. And I think a lot of it is like he probably.
How big is the gap between season 5 and 6?
It's, I think, 2 years.
Yeah, just about.
Yeah.
5 is 2004, and 6 is 2006.
Yeah. So, and then there was even a bigger gap between 12. Well, not a bigger gap, but like a gap between 12A or 6A and 6B.
Yeah.
6A was
about a year.
Yeah, almost a year. So I think there was like, I don't know if Chase had to like change things around how he wanted to end the series and stuff. And so that he decided to split it up into the 2 parts, 6A and 6B, because he didn't want to do another season after this. He wanted to try to finish it up in one more season. So he kind of did like an extended season and just broke it up into 2 parts. And I think a lot of it was just trying to like rush everything, try to like tie up loose ends, there's a lot of loose ends that had to be tied up in only, what is it, 21 episodes basically.
Yeah.
So I think that's, a lot of it kind of feels rushed at times.
Yeah, and I mean you get into like, well, you also see the fall of the New York mafia at that time, like
Well, you
during
see
the
really the
last two
fall of both
seasons too.
families
You
too.
do, you do, but but it happens really where like where the Soprano family, it's gradual and it's building towards their decline. The the New York family falls apart like very quickly after Carmine Lupertazzi passes.
Yes. That again, like you have a stable boss who dies and a power struggle ensues.
Yeah,
And basically that's like and that maybe that's a theme in the mafia world. Like I'm not super familiar with like every single mafia war that's ever occurred in, in the United States, but
I
maybe
don't
that is
know,
an
but
ongoing
I'm
theme that a power vacuum creates like these wars.
that could be. I mean, again, not an expert, don't know, but I'm sure it's happened more than once.
Yes. Um I think
But I always liked Johnny Sack. He was one of
yeah,
my.
Johnny Sack
He
is a
was
great
always one of my.
character.
He's always one of my favorite characters because he is a fair boss.
Yes.
Except for
He's very pragmatic.
yeah, he's a very fair boss. But I mean, unless you say something about his wife,
Yeah.
which
Then he'll want to sanction the hit against you.
yeah, which he's surprised when they don't sanction the hit. But I think it's but and he does say that like in the old days this would have happened without a question. But
Yeah, but there's millions of dollars at stake.
yeah, because Ralphie is the big earner, and
Yeah.
it's. But on top of that, I think there is some, but there is that does start another recurring theme where like it's the old ways versus the new ways
Yeah.
that we later start to see when Phil Leotardo takes over the New York Mafia, and how him and Feech Lamana are always about like what because they're guys who came out of who were in prison for 20 something years, similar with Richie Aprile, where the old school guys can't adjust to the times, and they don't, and
Yes.
because and they don't want to, and they don't want to feel like they're relics from a bygone era.
Yeah.
Like they want to be useful. Like Feech Lamana especially wants to be useful. Richie Aprile wants to take over.
Yeah.
You also have Phil Leotardo, who immediately seizes power. Um, and but you don't. But Feech Lamana is the one who gets a raw deal on this because he does legitimately just want to be useful. He wants to just get back to earning. He just want like, but
But he
he's not interested in becoming a boss. He's not interested in moving up. He just wants to play ball.
but he
But
also can't take orders from Tony, who's like way younger than him and like again ripped off his card game that one time. It's like,
right,
he can't bring himself to take orders from someone like that, and I think that really causes his downfall because then, there's a big scene where like Tony like tells this really stupid joke, and like you said this before, everyone's like cracking up laughing. But then he like looks and he sees that Feech is the only one that's not laughing, and not only that, he has this like annoyed, like pissed off look on his face, like you just stole my thunder. So Tony kind of realizes like there's no helping it. Like Feech is not, he's not gonna, it's gonna end up being another like Richie Aprile situation, basically, where he's gonna want to try to get me whacked because he doesn't want to take orders from me.
yeah. Which it seems like that, and then Feech seems like he's gonna come around eventually.
I
He's
don't
like
think he would have though. I think he says that. I think he's like, I'll try, but I think Tony was right that he's like nip it in the bud. Like I think he was right that Feech was not going to come around.
that was likely the right decision.
Yes.
I like I think there's a chance that Feech was willing to try to turn it around, but and he really like that he was legitimately going to try, but I think you're right. I think he either would have turned or he would have gotten himself killed or
Yeah.
something like that. But
And I think
it's
Tony
un,
did the right thing of not whacking him, but just getting him sent back to prison, basically.
it's
Like they,
unfortunate that that happens, but I
yeah.
think that was like a more just decision instead of just getting another like what's the point of killing another old man?
Well, even Silvio says like he's well liked Tony, so it's like it's like, yeah, like he is well liked. Like everyone loved Feach because he was like this. He was like a legend in that crime family, basically.
Yeah.
And so it would have been, just as bad to whack him because that would have caused like a problem there too. So like Tony's like, well, what am I gonna do? Split the difference, and he sets him up to get popped on a parole violation and go back to prison, basically.
Right.
Um, we haven't talked about Silvio yet, and I think we should because
No,
Silvio
we
is like
haven't.
such a
He's
great character. And again, I think of all the guys that are actually mafia guys, Silvio is Tony's only real friend. Like
yeah.
he's the one that's like, okay, like he's friend. He's not there to necessarily like try to get more power or like kowtow to the boss. Like he's willing to tell Tony things that are really hard to say, like to tell him.
Yeah.
Like,
He's the most fair character out of everything, and he's the
yes,
one who serves as the he's the one who serves as the diplomat. He's
yes.
not trying to like
He's
he's
a good consigliere. Like he
yes,
does that role perfectly. He is the like perfect consigliere for Tony.
yes, like he's a true Machiavellian to this whole thing.
Yes. And he interestingly enough, so Sylvia Dante is played by Steven Van Zandt, who for those who don't know he played guitar for the E Street Band with Bruce Springsteen for many years and has his own band, and so he's known as Little Steven. And he had never acted before the role of Silvio Dante, never once in his life,
Really?
and kind of just like he actually originally auditioned for the role of Tony Soprano on like a whim, just to see like, oh, let's see what happens. I think his
Yeah,
agent kind of set it up like, hey, why don't you, if you want to try
probably.
acting, why don't you try to audition for this show that's coming up? And he didn't get it because he wasn't like an actor, so like whatever. So like he didn't get the role, that went to Gandolfini, who was an established actor. But they called him and they're like, hey, okay, we didn't give you the role of the main character, but do you want a role on the show because we liked you? And he became Silvio. And for someone who's never acted before, he does a pretty damn good job, I think.
Yeah, I mean it's a very believable performance.
Yeah.
Like
And
it
Sylvia's kind of this over the top character, but it just works. Like Steven Van Zandt, like just did like it just works the way he portrayed Silvio.
yeah, well the pomp and circumstance you'll always find a guy who's a character like that, and
Yeah,
like in any group, no matter where they are, no matter like what their role is, you're gonna get a character here and there. So like he fits the bill because Paulie is like Paulie's the guy who like everyone knows that he's a character, but Paulie is so exaggerated where like we at least this is my theory is that we the audience realize that this whole thing is an act for of Paulie. Like Paulie is intentionally being an idiot
yes.
and like just being a character and being loud and everything so that people don't take him seriously enough to really like think that he would undermine them or to like try to get rid of him or anything. And he is very good at his job anyway. So with Paulie, he's putting on an act. But with Silvio is a character, but he's very good at his job, and he's also like just very fair. But people, but unlike Paulie, where people think he's an idiot even though he's not, everyone like with the like Silvio's not an idiot, but like people overestimate how smart of a guy he is because
Yeah.
he's very good at giving advice to others, but we see later on when Tony's in a coma that he's a terrible boss and he's terrible at
I don't
making
think he's
his
terrible. I
own
think he
decisions.
can't rise to the occasion
And
is
so
the problem.
like he's not good under pressure.
No, he can't handle the stress of being number one. He is a good number two. And he even says that at some point. He's like, some people are better at being number twos, and that's like definitely Silvio. Like he
Yeah.
he is 100% better at being number two, basically. Um and it's funny because Steven Van Zandt actually, after Sopranos, ended up in a Netflix original series called Lilyhammer, where he also plays a mob boss. And there's actually a theory. So in the end of Sopranos, Silvio ends up getting shot during the war with New York, and is in a coma, much like Tony in the beginning of season 6. And there's a theory that Lilyhammer is Silvio's coma dream. It's like a fan theory because he plays he basically plays a mafia boss who has to go on the run and gets relocated to Norway. So he's
Oh,
like
that's
this
funny.
Italian mafia boss living in Norway, basically, and trying to like establish himself there. So that's a whole theory like that he's that's his coma dream, basically.
Interesting. I've
Yeah.
never seen this show, so I don't know if like weird stuff happens or
I've
if
seen
like.
episodes of it. It's actually not bad. I would actually watch it. I haven't watched the whole thing through, but it's not bad. It's pretty. It was actually one of Netflix's first shows ever
Oh,
that they
really?
like original series. Yeah,
Huh. Good to know.
yeah. So yeah, whatever. It's an interesting theory.
Yeah.
But yeah,
But like,
Silvio is definitely like the best at being Tony's consigliere, and I think really gives Tony like some of the best advice throughout the series. And like, Tony sometimes like will lash out against Silvio and say like, and be like, no, you don't, like, fuck you or whatever, because his ego's too big. But then ends up like taking Silvio's advice in the end, and it's like realizes, oh yeah, he was right. I think like one great example is during like the whole like Tony B situation. When Tony's cousin Tony B like goes off the reservation and like kills Phil Leotardo's brother and all that, and Tony's kind of like protecting him because it's his cousin. But Silvio's like, basically like, look, you don't. It has nothing to do with protecting your cousin. It's like you don't want to like take shit from John, basically, John Sacramone.
mhm.
And like Tony's like, well, fuck you. Like you have no idea what it's like to be the boss and what and like whatever. But then like in the end, Tony kind of realizes like, yeah, I can't keep fighting John on this. Like it's gonna cause a fucking war and it's gonna hurt both sides. Like it's gonna hurt our bottom line, which is basically so he takes it upon himself to shoot Tony B.
Well,
And
also because Phil Leotardo was hunting him down and
yes.
like he's somewhat aware that Phil knows Tony B's location. So he
Well,
knows
no, they
what.
don't know Tony B is, but it's implied that like they're gonna torture him, which is
Well,
why
yeah,
like
that's the other thing is he knows what eventually it's a matter of time when Phil gets his hands on him. When he does,
yeah.
they're going to torture him very badly.
Yeah.
So
And
they
that's
can't.
like the one thing he wants is like, yeah, he's like, I know it's got to happen, but do it quick, kind of thing. It's my cousin.
Yeah, because Phil is a sadist. We see that
Yes.
throughout the series. When we get to Phil, we'll talk about him in a minute.
Phil is really like the arch nemesis of the series because, he appears in season 5 and immediately starts causing problems. And by the end of season 6, when he's the boss, he is like full on like fuck everybody. I'm the boss now, and we're gonna like just friggin' go to war, and like I don't give a shit.
Yeah,
And
the
even like
power gets to his head immediately.
yeah, like 100% immediately. And again, great acting by Frank
Frank
Vincent,
Vincent.
who again is a veteran of mafia movies. He was in Goodfellas and Sopranos and Goodfellas. It's interesting because he kind of like uh gets his revenge for Goodfellas a little bit. So in Goodfellas he plays Billy Bats and gets killed by Tommy, who's played by Joe Pesci. And they stuff him in the trunk and stab him and shoot him. And in Sopranos, they ambush Angelo, which is one of the rival capos in the New York family, and stuff him in the trunk and shoot him. So it's like he kind of like recreates his death as Billy Bats in The Sopranos, but except it's somebody else.
Hmm.
But yeah, he really is like the arch nemesis, and even like Agent Harris, who's one of the FBI agents that originally is kind of like hunting down Tony, but then like he gets transferred to anti-terrorism, so he kind of almost befriends Tony after he's like not on the case anymore.
Right,
And
because he keeps showing up at Satriel's, which is the pork store that they all congregate at,
yes,
and he which is one of the places where Tony, as a child, had his panic attacks.
yes,
Um, but But yeah, Agent Harris shows up and he's telling him about counterterrorism and everything, and he's just like, "So did you really want to put me away?" He's like, "Honestly," he's like, "Why do you?" He's like, "If you hated me so much, why do you keep coming back here?" And he's like, "I really like the sandwiches, and also it was nothing personal with you. It's just I'm just doing my job."
Yeah.
Like he humanizes the federal agent character.
Yeah. Well, because it's shown throughout the series that the FBI is willing to go to lengths that are like almost not maybe not as quite as bad as the mafia, but almost there. Like they
Yeah.
blackmail people, they frame people. It's pretty bad just to get Tony.
Well, everything they put Adriana through
Yes,
is just a mess, which we haven't even talked about her a whole lot.
yeah.
I
It's
mean, and
just
we haven't even finished Christopher's arc, talking about Christopher's arc too.
yeah. To go into everybody's arc would literally we'd be here until like
We
3 o'clock in the morning because it's
oh
impossible.
oh yeah, and we could do it.
We could, yeah, we could. I just want to finish up like so. Even Agent Harris says that like he never liked Phil Leotardo because he like at one point he had set up a female agent for a rape and beating or something, and it's yeah. So Phil is really like the top scumbag of all the scumbags basically.
Oh yeah, I mean, even with his, we even see it with like what he does to his brother, like right, Vito's his brother-in-law or cousin,
Vito's his cousin-in-law.
his cousin-in-law.
Yeah.
So he like, so like Vito is some Vito's a big earner in Tony's crew,
He
and
takes over the April crew after Ralphie.
that's right, he
Yeah.
does. I
So
totally forgot that.
yep.
Well, anyway, Vito's gay. Nobody cares except Phil. That's the long and short of it. People
It's kind of implied that Phil might be in the closet as well because he spent so much time in jail that he might have had to resort to, homoerotic behavior to
yeah,
like get his rocks off while he was in prison. So I think a lot of it is like him projecting his own insecurities, and that's why he hates Vito so much.
yeah, it's unclear as to that. That's one of the theories on Phil. I mean, for God's sakes, when they kill Vito, Phil literally comes out of a
Yeah,
closet.
he literally comes out of the closet like
And as they're beating Vito to death, you could see the way that he's gripping. Like the choice that Frank Vincent made is very interesting in that scene alone because it doesn't show you what they're doing to Vito, but it zooms in on Phil, who's sitting on the bed and he's clutching the sheets, almost like he's getting like a sexual thrill out of it.
yeah. And we
So
hear later that like basically they beat him to death and shoved a pool cue up his ass.
yeah,
So,
which
take of that what
whether
you will.
yeah, I mean, Phil like but yeah, it's sad with what happens with Vito because Vito's just he's on the like he goes on the lam when people find out that he's gay, but he outs himself in the worst possible way because it's while he's doing his collections.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, no, he says he's
oh no,
going off
he
the
says he's
collections,
going.
but then he
Yeah,
goes to a gay bar in New York City, which is like, okay, it's prime mafia territory. Like, you're at that point, you're just wanting to get caught. Like,
well, it's not even that he's at the gay bar in the city. He's at the gay bar where they do collections from.
yes, yeah,
So the other guys are coming in to do the same collections. Like, wouldn't you know which, like, you would know which clubs to do that they don't take collections from. So go to those.
you would think so, but
You would think that. But he lets his guard down and well, he gets caught with his assless chaps open, basically. And it's not good for Vito. He goes on the lam because Phil finds out and Phil wants to kill him. And eventually, Tony's like, I don't know what to do. Like, it's like we kind of have to. He's kind of like Tony doesn't care and he wants to like just let it go and just pretend no one knows what happened to him and just let him do whatever.
well, even after Vito comes back, he's like kind of like mulls the possibility of Vito like moving to Atlantic City and still get like providing some kind of income stream, just not being in
Right.
like North Jersey essentially.
Right. And
So
then even
like
that's not and then Phil decides that that's not going to work either. So Phil goes and does what does what he decides to do.
yeah, well, Phil is the most against it by far of anybody. Like, like
Yes.
all the guys are kind of like grossed out by it. And again, this is like, not to say like these aren't good people. So like, don't like try to say,
No.
oh, well, they should be canceled. It's like, no, yeah, they're assholes. They're like these very insecure macho guys that like, think that homosexuality is a sin and is like really bad. So they all kind of have like a bad
Yeah.
reaction to it when they
Even
find out that Vito's gay. But
even
like
Bobby Bacala, that everyone thinks is the nicest guy, he's also the nicest guy in the mafia, so he's still a dirtbag.
exactly. And but even like, there's a point where Tony's like, I don't really give a shit, like, does it really affect me? No. Like, if Vito wants to live that life, whatever. And like, and then when he finds out, like, okay, maybe I can get some kind of like an income stream from it also, like, okay, like, all
Yeah.
right, so yeah, okay, go to Atlantic City. But then like Phil is like so adamant that like Vito has to die because it's like dishonoring his family and all that. So like basically like Tony's like, well, we're gonna have to do it. Like we're gonna have to whack him. And but then like Phil finds him first because again Vito was stupid and came back to New Jersey when he was supposed to be on the lam.
Yeah.
Because he missed the life so much basically. And so like, and Tony kind of like tries to save face and he's like, well, if I got DeVito first, the result would have been the same, blah, blah, blah. But it's at that point that he realizes, all right, like Phil doesn't give a shit. He is willing to kill one of my capos without permission because, to kill a made guy, you need to get like, there has to be a sit down. There has to be like it's a whole thing,
Yeah.
Made guys are untouchable. And so like it basically that's like Phil just like like taking the rule book and like fucking wiping his ass with it in front of Tony's face.
Right, which is interesting because Phil is always preaching about how he's about principles and how he like
Yeah, the
how he
old
can't
school
make any
rules and all that.
compromises. But that's all bullshit because
Yes.
because when it comes down to he only wants to do whatever's on his in his best interests. So Phil is like just the biggest hypocrite on the entire show.
Oh, I mean, they all pretty much are though. Let's face it.
No, they all are big hypocrites, but Phil is pretty much the biggest. Like it's, but yeah, there's several theories as to whether or not Phil is himself in the closet because he like had to resort to that because he had to resort to men in prison, or
He did 20 fucking years in the can.
yeah, oh, he'll let you know without a peep. And like it's either that or he witnessed a lot of his guys who he felt were like very macho or whatever, or wouldn't do that, or guys who said they wouldn't do that. He saw them turn. So he's either like traumatized and disgusted by what he saw or what he did, or a combination of the two.
Yeah.
Or it may have happened to him. Like he may have been a victim in prison, and
Maybe.
like he might have been somebody's bitch in those 20 years.
I doubt it. Like I don't think mafia guys were somebody's bitch.
I don't think so either, but you never know.
Yeah.
We don't get to see what happens. We don't get the Oz version of that.
Yeah.
So that's unclear, but yeah, there's some kind of shame that Phil is holding in regard as to why he's so homophobic.
Yeah.
But anyway, everybody pretty much gets popped, and that like leads us to I guess I would like to speak about the women on the show too, as well as a little bit of Bobby Bacala. Like Bobby Bacala, he's like we said, he's the nicest guy in the mafia, but
Yeah.
he never actually really does anything. He doesn't really prove himself. He gets high up in the chain because his father
that has like this whole like from rags to riches kind of story because he basically starts out as like Junior Soprano's like servant, like manservant. Like he's in Junior's crew, and then when Junior gets released from jail, Tony has Bobby like basically like, all right, you're just gonna like help my uncle and do whatever he says, basically. Like you're gonna be his like gopher. And that's basically where he goes, and he goes all the way up to Tony's underboss by the end of the series.
Yeah. Without having to really kill anybody, by the way.
Yeah,
He
well,
kills
does
like
kill
one
somebody
guy. He kills one guy.
and that's really Tony out of spite doing it. So there's a whole thing where they go up. This is after Janice marries Bobby Bacala. So again, she goes after all of her brother's associates, basically. And they have a lake house upstate New York, and Tony and Carmela go up for Tony's birthday. And they're drinking and having a good time and playing Monopoly, and as often happens in Monopoly, a fight breaks out.
Or why do they even have that game anymore?
Well, they have the fight because like Tony's like insulting Janice basically, and
yeah,
but, like it really it boils over because of like a fight over Monopoly. essentially. So they get in a fight, and Bobby ends up winning the fight because he's a little bit bigger than Tony, and Tony had been shot, so he's not as strong as he used to be, whatever. So Tony, as kind of like a spite thing, sends Bobby to do a hit, which Bobby had never done a hit before, and he even says specifically that my dad never wanted it for me. So like, it was a big thing because his dad was like one of the biggest like hitmen of the mafia. Like his dad had killed like many people. So
Well, his dad goes out doing one last hit.
Yeah, exactly. Like it literally goes out doing one last hit. So it's like, I think Tony calls him the Terminator, basically. So like that's kind of like like kind of Tony getting his revenge, like being petty about it, basically. I think that whole situation, because Bobby again is like for a mafia guy, he's like this sweet guy. They say like his wife Karen, his first wife, dies in a car accident, and he like it's like very distraught over it. Like it like really devastates him. And the other mafia wives are talking about it, and they're basically like saying like he's the only one of them that doesn't have a guma, which is like unheard of in the mafia. And those who don't know, guma is like a mistress, because that's just a thing that mob guys do, is have mistresses. So like they say that he like really like loved his wife and like didn't ever like have a mistress or anything, and that was like like how noble he was, and he really is a nice guy. And then by the end of the series, he's probably almost as bad as the rest of them, basically.
Yeah, he gets corrupted pretty quickly.
Yeah. So
him and his nice little train collection.
Yeah. Which again, that ends up like being the death of him, because he's friggin' looking for a train and doesn't have his phone on him when he gets whacked. So
yeah,
he's looking to buy a rare like model train.
Yep. The crown jewel in his collection cost him everything.
The Blue Comet.
What a comet. Anyway, I feel bad for the owner of that train store, because what do you do? Your business and reputation is ruined from that
now it's a
point
crime
on.
scene. The fucking like there's bullet holes everywhere, blood splatter. Like
you'll never sell another train again. It's eBay for you.
Hey, maybe that'll put his business on the map. Hey, Bobby Bacala from the New Jersey Mafia got whacked here. Damn, let's go shopping there.
That's true. I never thought of having a train collection, but a mafia train collection. Oh boy,
exactly.
Yeah, this is true. It could have gone both ways for that guy.
Yeah.
Anyway, moving on. So I guess, well, I want to talk about the women of The Sopranos really quickly, just because we've been at this for 2 hours. Like we said, we can't get to everybody. But we did speak about this a little bit when we were talking about Edie Falco's acting, and just the chemistry that her and James Gandolfini have really sets the bar for the entire show.
Yeah.
Because you really believe the arguments that they have.
Yes.
And
they
you also
are
believe the issues.
100%.
Yes. And you believe the issues that she's going through too, where she's, she wants to do her own thing and she wants to be independent, but she also wants to get away. She also wants to get away from Tony too, because he's not loyal to her. He treats her pretty awful. And at the same, but she's also conflicted because she wants to act like she's not a mafia. Like she's in denial that she's a mafia's wife. Yeah.
She realizes that she'll never, like, she can't not have that lifestyle.
Yes.
If she divorces Tony, she's not going to live in a mansion. She's not going to have nice jewelry. She's not going to have nice clothes. She's going to have to get a small apartment and have a shitty car. So, like, I think she kind of, like, by the end of the series reconciles that fact. Like, she's like, okay, well, I could set up my own little real estate thing that Tony could finance, and I could still have all my cars and shit and do my own thing, but also, like, I'll kind of turn a blind eye to his extracurricular activities kind of thing,
Yeah, well, it's because she sees what happens to Big Puss's wife.
Yeah.
Because like she's, they give her a little bit of money or whatever to like help her like set herself up and whatever, or just to like, just to kind of, get her legs out from under her. But after that, they pretty much disconnect with her completely. where like
Yeah.
she's working at a store, like she's working at a supermarket, and then they like and then she ends up taking over
Pussy's
a
body shop.
like yeah, she ends up taking over the body shop, which
It's like a
was
chop shop, really.
yeah, I mean, it was his front.
Yeah.
It was his front. It was his W-2, but she ends up getting really into it and becoming a really successful
Well,
businesswoman.
and
And
she
like,
starts putting money on the street too, and like like, and then like I think I forget which one of them. I think Rosalie, who's Jackie April's widow, says at one point like that she's one of them now. She
yeah,
becomes like one of the guys basically because she like puts all this money out on the street and becomes like this like mob woman basically.
yeah. But like, good for her. Like, she has an interesting arc, and you really
Yeah.
don't see a whole lot of it.
No, every character in this show has an interesting arc, pretty much.
Hmm.
Like they all do. Like there's no like, oh, okay, like this is just a throwaway person that we're gonna get rid of. Like even like the lesser like the smaller roles like have like these pretty great arcs, and it just that's again it's like just goes to show how great the writing is for this show.
Right. Well, like Rosalie April is interesting in the way that like she goes through all of the grieving and she goes through these terrible tragedies and everything, but at the end of the day, she moves on from all of it, and
Yes.
she and like when and like it's these things that most people it would be impossible for them to come back from, and she's kind of like I forget if she says something if she like says something along like that like sums it up, or she's just kind of like I knew what I signed up for when I was getting into this thing.
Yeah.
So like none of this like I hate that it happened, but I knew it was gonna I knew something like I knew I would experience this. So like she mentally prepared herself for all of this grief,
Yeah.
and she's able to like make the most out of it. Like she still goes out and has a good time, which after losing your after you losing your only son and your husband, and all the other grief that she dealt with. I mean, she does have the daughter, but the daughter is like not in like doesn't want anything to do with anybody. We only ever see her daughter when Jackie Jr. dies,
Yeah.
when he and like all that she can do is talk about what an idiot he was.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Meadow ends up having the biggest arc of all the women, but we'll get to that in a moment because that ties into the end game theory that we have to wrap this up with.
Yes.
But you get Adriana, who is a lot of people's favorite character, who's from the show, and she's the character that you root for to get out of it and to come to her senses and to just leave Christopher and to just leave this lifestyle because it's slowly killing her,
Yes.
and she just gets sucked in. Like she tries and she can't get away from it, and she's just in too deep and she doesn't know it. And that ends up being her downfall too.
Yeah.
And she's been in the news a little bit here and there. The actress who plays Adriana, Drea De Matteo, she she's been saying that like she wishes that she had more time to really get into Adriana and to like really like appreciate it,
Mhm.
because now that she's looking back at everything, she's just kind of like, I wish there was more that I got to explore with her, as
Yeah.
opposed to like, because like it's easy to say when you're reflecting and you're just like, oh man, I wish I did that thing, or oh, I should have taken more time with that, or I should have really worked on this thing. But what it's hard when you're in the moment and you're just doing it. Like you don't a lot of, especially for a show like this that was such a hit. It's hard to just it's hard to be in the moment. It's hard to think about what choices you should make. It's hard to think about how you should develop a character or what you should do or what actions you should take or anything like that.
Mhm.
Because something as successful of a show as at the time, and I don't know how old she is now, but I think she's in her early 50s, possibly. She was what in her like
Mm.
mid to late 20s when she was doing this show.
Yeah.
That's hard for you to like. There's you have to just like your whole aim is just I got to keep working, I got to keep working, I got to keep working, and you don't take there's it's very rare where they take time to really sink their teeth into something. But for
Mhm.
what it's worth, I think she played the character as well as anybody could have. I think
Yeah.
and I think she's the only one who could have been Adriana and left that impression on people.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I,
we see her just going through her roller coaster, and she's one of the few characters where you root for the entire time, and then it's such a letdown. Like like it's such a letdown when when she does eventually, get written off TV.
yeah. Yeah, she and again,
And
she
even
she
when
gets
even
take she gets blackmailed by the FBI, and that really like it's just like it's shitty. It's shitty what happens to her. It really is. Like cuz you know, I don't want to say she's innocent because she's complacent in Christopher's
yes,
crimes.
she she is
But
complicit and she tries to be ignorant to it.
yeah. And but at the same time she's just trying to like live her life, she loves Christopher obviously, like and she wants to like have a life with him, but like it just leads to her downfall because first of all he's a piece of shit that like routinely beats her basically.
Yeah,
And then also at the same time, the FBI is trying to like use their relationship to like get to Tony and like, gets her on some bogus charges basically. And basically is like, oh, either you help us or you go to jail for the rest of your life. You know? So
yeah,
so she has like no choice. She just gets trapped and that like it really ends up like killing, she ends up having like like ulcerative colitis or something. Like it like affects her like really deeply, the stress of the situation. And and then it obviously leads to her death, when they find out. So
yeah. And you even see it on Silvio's face when he has to carry out the act because he has that expression like I like I don't want to do this, but I have. But you really gave me no choice here.
yeah,
Like you could see the frustration on his face when he's walking toward her.
yeah, yeah.
But
It's
and then you have
rough.
Janice, which we've talked about at large already. But
Yeah.
she's Janice is just as bad as Janice is is the female version of Tony.
Yes.
Like just there's no difference between the two of them except for that.
Yeah.
But she's like I don't know. Could Janice have been a boss at some point?
Probably.
Yeah, I think she could have.
Yeah. If there were female bosses, yeah. Well, there is a
Yeah,
female boss in Italy, but that's like a whole different thing.
yeah. They're very progressive over there, but also uh she's she's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, she takes over as boss because her father was the boss and he's senile, and her husband was acting boss and he gets put in prison for life. So
Right,
basically, the Italian family has no choice but to have her as boss.
right. But she ends up being very good.
Yes.
So we see that as well. But I don't want to draw this out any further.
Yeah.
But I do appreciate everything going on. Oh my god! And also like Dr. Melfi, who
Oh, yeah.
just she's one of the best characters on the show. I mean, we
Yeah.
say that about everybody, but it's hard to not have five favorites. Like
Yeah.
she's the driving force of everything that happens, and she sees Tony's change, and she also I like how we see how she debates. When when she gets raped in the staircase, how she even starts to debate as to whether or not she should tell Tony what really happened to her
Yeah, because Tony will
because
fucking like murder the guy absolutely, like
yeah,
for her.
especially when she sees that the guy gets acquitted
Yes.
and that he can
On a
like just
technicality.
that he can freely walk the streets. Like I like that we see her inner struggle too, where she's like, and she picks up the phone and she's ready to call him and just tell him, "Hey,
Well,
I
no,
know
no,
the
it's like she's sitting there with him in therapy and she starts to
yeah,
cry and he's like, "What's wrong?" Like, and like she kind of like looks at him for a second and then she just says nothing, you know,
yeah."
or
But
I'm
she was
fine or whatever.
very
Like,
ready. But she's very ready in that moment to cross over.
yeah. And I think it's important that she doesn't because that really shows that like really like, Melfi, despite her flaws of, treating Tony and like, kind of being complacent with Tony in a way, like is still like willing to like uphold her values and stuff. She doesn't succumb to that, the temptation because she like again one word to Tony and he will fucking absolutely track the guy down and fucking like cut his balls off and shove it up his mouth. Like
Oh yeah,
so. It's a big struggle and it that
yeah, and we see how she's ostracized in her own community too,
Yes. Yeah,
where
all the other doctors and psychologists kinda, like, could criticize her, and, this ends up, like, when she, like, cuts Tony loose at the end of the series because she, realizes that she can't help him because you can't help a sociopath, and, I mean, I don't know if Tony is a true sociopath, uh, but, like, this is what leads Melfi to drop him, is that she reads a study that sociopaths and criminals oftentimes use psychotherapy to, like, make their con better, They'll talk to a psychotherapist and to, like, so they can, like, hone their skills at conning people, basically, and she feels that's what Tony's been doing for years, and that went and cuts him loose at the end.
yeah,
So,
we do have the mistresses, which they all have their tragic mini arcs, and we won't really get into it because again, we don't want to. I don't want to take too long on this, but I just
yeah.
wanted to note that, they too are also very sad characters that Tony takes full on advantage of, and he like really breaks them down and gives them a lot of false hope.
Mhm.
But I wonder if they're like I wonder if they have something to do with his psyche, or if they're like variations of Carmela that he like
Well, I mean, it's pretty much
would
implied
like.
like some of the mistresses that he goes with are his mother. Like Gloria
Mhm.
specifically
Oh
very
yeah,
much is like his mother. And
yeah,
so like there's a whole like Oedipus complex going on with Tony, which is implied from the start basically. Um that he's got a lot of mommy issues. He's
oh
got a
yeah.
lot of daddy issues too, but the mommy issues probably like supersede that a little bit.
Oh, I'm sure they do. And I mean, when we see how Livia is for the first couple of seasons,
Yes.
she's hysterical, but she's just awful to him, and she's always going back and forth and constantly gaslighting him.
Yes.
And Janice goes along with her, which like doubles the torment for him too. So we see a lot of that. I mean, Livia was supposed to go on a lot longer, but like the actual actress did develop. I believe she had cancer and she passed away.
Yeah, she passed away actually before between season 2 and 3 and so they used like a CGI kind of thing which was a little weird. The CGI was not great at the time, so it looks a little like off-putting. It's definitely like an uncanny valley thing
Mm,
that they did. Um to kind of write her off the show. They gave her like one last little scene with Tony and then she has a stroke and dies
mm,
like off screen. So
right,
um because Nancy Marchand, the actress, passed away sadly between before she could film the scene. So
right,
uh, whatever it. At the time, it's like okay, what are they gonna do? They have to do something to write her off, and
right,
they wanted to have. Originally, season 3 was supposed to be like all about like Tony trying to convince her not to testify against him because she ends up getting arrested at the end of season 2 for using like the plane tickets that he had bought from the bust out in one of the previous episodes of season 2. So
right,
she gets arrested by the FBI and they're going to try to force her to testify against Tony. And season 3 was originally going to be Tony trying to convince her to not do that or maybe whack her, who knows. But then Nancy Marchand died, so they kind of had to write her off the show
right.
and
Well, she's
change up
not.
how season 3 was going to be.
Right. Well, she's not the only character that they wanted to expand on. They did want to they did originally plan to for Feech Lamana, played by Robert Loggia, to have a longer recurring role on the series, and he probably would have ended up being a continued antagonist of Tony. But Robert Loggia he was suffering Alzheimer's, and he was having trouble remembering his lines.
Yeah.
So because he just kept showing up and like causing delays because of just his health issues, they ended up cutting the character short.
Yeah.
But that leads us to this ending. So we'll talk about Meadow for a bulk of it too. But the biggest controversy of this show is the ending,
Mm-hmm.
which we all know what happens. This ruined Journey for me forever, by the way. I hate Journey now. I hate that stupid song. I hate Don't Stop Believing. I
Don't
hope they
stop.
never play it again. I don't want anybody to ever hear it. Anybody who enjoys this thing, I want to be nice because it's the holidays, so I don't want to say anything too bad. But I hope they go down on a Ponzi scheme. I can't stand anybody who thinks that this is a great song. Even if it's you. If you, my co-host, think that this is a great song, I hope you go down in a Ponzi scheme.
It's definitely overplayed, that's for sure.
I hate this song. When we were getting married and we were talking to the DJ, he was like, we sit down and you sit down. The DJ is like, oh, do you what type of vibe are we going for? What kind of songs would you like to hear? What are like five that you would absolutely need to hear? And then, you do that. And he's like, are there any songs that you don't want to hear? And I'm like, Don't Stop Believing. Please don't fucking play that goddamn song. Like, immediately. And he starts laughing and he's like, thank God, I hate that song too. So he was very good. Dash of Class. If have your wedding with them. It's a free plug for anyone who's there. DJ Joey O is the man. But good God, I hate that song. So they're in the diner, and and that stupid song. It's the name I will not speak anymore. Comes on the radio, and everybody's having a good time. The door keeps ringing, and we keep seeing. The theory is, from Tony's point of view, we keep seeing the doorbell, and then the music stops and everything goes black. You hear the doorbell ring, and no one knows what happens.
Let's talk about the black thing first, because all of a sudden, like, it just the screen just cuts out to black in the middle of like the song, and like when this first aired, this was like unprecedented. People thought that their cable went out. They weren't sure what the hell happened.
I was one of those people. I called 3 of my friends.
Yeah, everybody freaked out about it.
We all asked the same question. What happened? Yeah. Did my goddamn cable went out? What the hell happened?
Yeah.
Did you see it? No, I didn't see it either. God damn it. What goodbye. Hang up, call friend number 2. Hey, did you see what happened? No, my cable went out too. God damn it. All right, fine. I'll call you later. Call the other person. Hey, what happened? I just talked to 3 people. Everybody's cable shut off at the same time. There must have been a power outage. So the next day, because we all lived in the same neighborhood, so we all thought that like maybe just something bad happened to like that specific area. So the next day you're talking to other people, and then they who all think the same thing happened to them.
Yeah.
And then you all kind of realize at the same time, oh, God damn it, this was intentional.
Yep. But looking back on it and the theory behind why it happens, it actually makes sense. So
I appreciate it more now, but I hated it then.
Most people did, and I think most people appreciate it more now, but hated it when it first happened.
There's a lot of foreshadowing in
Yeah.
season 6, and you can argue throughout the rest of the show, but I don't think that this was the original. I don't think that the theory was the original intention
No.
of the
So, well,
ending.
so the theory is that Tony gets shot and he dies, and
Right.
that's why it cuts to black. And there's a lot of foreshadowing throughout season 6. When he's with Bobby up in the lake house, they're talking in the boat, and Bobby said, like, they're talking about, like, death. And Bobby says, like, oh, you probably don't even realize it when it happens, kind of thing. Like,
Yeah.
implying that, like, you get shot or something. You're not even going to know. You're going to be dead.
Yeah, he's like, you probably don't even. I think the exact verbiage that he uses, you don't even hear it.
Yeah. And then there's another scene later on where Tony's like during the full blown war with New York, and Tony's in the safe house, and he's kind of like falling asleep in the bed, and like it goes to like his point of view. He's looking out the door, and it kind of slowly fades to black, implying that he's like falling asleep, right? So there's the second like big. Okay, so now we go to the scene at Holston's, and Tony's sitting there, and every time the bell rings, he looks up, and you see Tony's point of view. You see who's coming through the door, because it's Tony looking up to see who's coming through the door. So, everybody comes one by one, because they're all like, doing their own thing. Like AJ's working his own job. Carmela's got some meeting she's got to go to. So Tony gets to the diner first, then Carmela comes in, then AJ. And Meadow is last because she had to go to the doctor's office, and she can't fucking park her car worth of shit.
No, the worst Parker on
She's
earth.
the worst parker in the history of the world. So she's stuck outside trying to park her car, parallel park. And, like I said, every time the bell rings, Tony looks up and somebody new comes in. First Carmela, then some random guy, then AJ, then another random people. It's a whole thing. And it really is building up the tension, this scene, by the way, because you don't know what's going to happen. It's like, this is the last scene of the show. Like, what could possibly happen? Like, all this tension is getting built up. It's almost
Right,
like a freaking Alfred Hitchcock movie, the amount of suspense there is.
Oh yeah, and we also know. Well, actually, David. Which interesting you say that. One of David Chase's earlier things that he had worked on was Alfred Hitchcock's Presents.
Oh, well, there you go. um, so finally, Meadow parks her car. She runs across the street, and we hear the bell
Yeah,
ring one more
in
time.
the 1986 episode "Enough Rope for Two"
Oh, there you go.
was what he wrote on. That's what it was,
Um,
and he directed it as well. Anyway,
so
continue.
Meadow runs through the door. The bell rings. Tony looks up, and then the cuts to black. Just as "Don't Stop," like it's like "Don't Stop," and then just that's it, darkness. So, again, the implication is that Tony looks up to see who comes through the door, and then sees blackness because he's shot in the head. And there's various theories who killed Tony, who set him up. Like, was it the New York family? Did they like lie that they wanted peace and they actually didn't? Like, there's a lot of implication that maybe Paulie had something to do with it, possibly. There's a lot of different theories, fan theories. And originally, David Chase did not say what he intended by the scene. He was very silent about this for a very long time. And
He actually slipped it by accident while he was on a talk show interview in like 2021 or 2022.
Yes, it was very recently. So but like, and it was like kind of like, because everybody asked him that question years after year after year. Every interview he went on, what happened? What happened at the end of Sopranos? Can you explain the ending? And he always refused. And finally, I think he was kind of like, fine, he dies. Like, that's basically.
Well, they caught him off guard where he was talking. He was talking about it because they did like a sequel movie, Many Saints of Newark. It's not good.
It's a prequel movie, and it's not good.
That's right. It's a prequel movie. It's not very good. Even David Chase has admitted that
timeline got fucked up.
Yeah, that he ruined the timeline because he thought that he knew it better than he did, and he
also didn't want to do it. He didn't want to do it as a Sopranos movie. He brought it to HBO as like a separate thing that had to do with the Newark riots, and they're like, "Oh, so it's going to be a Sopranos prequel?" And he's like, "No," and he's like, "This is about the Newark riots," and they're like, "Oh, but you're going to make it a Sopranos prequel, right?" And he's like, "I guess." He really didn't even want to fucking do a Sopranos prequel.
Yeah, it was kind of one of those things, like you said, where they like kept pushing him, and he's just like, "If I say yes, will you give me the money to make this?"
Yeah, exactly.
So, that was that, and he really like. Anyway, so he's on some talk show doing like an interview, and he's talking about the Sopranos, and he's like he like mentioned the diner, but he didn't call it the last shot. He didn't call it the last scene. He referenced it as the death scene,
Yeah,
and they were like, "Wait, what do you mean death scene?" And he was like, "Oh fuck, okay, well now you know."
yeah. So, but I think his whole intention originally when it came out is that it didn't matter whether Tony Soprano died there or if he died later on or if the FBI came in. Like the whole point of the scene is that Tony was going to be looking over his shoulder for the rest of his life because
Yeah,
he was going to be a paranoid neurotic mess for the rest of his life because whether he was going to get arrested or and they talk about this like multiple times throughout the series that like, you know, that lifestyle either ends in prison or in a grave. That's it. There's no way out of it. So that was like the kind of like the original like intention of that. It's like you don't know because Tony's not going to know. Tony's not going to know what's going to happen for the rest of his life. He's always going to be looking over his shoulder. And you know, of course, people don't want that. They always want like, oh, we need a concrete explanation. I can't form my own opinion. You need to tell me what to think. And that's
yeah,
why, you know, they always kind of act ass chase like, oh, what really happened? You know.
yeah. But what's your theory as to what really happened? Like, how did Tony die? Who killed Tony? What what
So
happens?
I used to be of the theory of like I don't know what happened. I don't know like if he actually died or not. You know, I was kind of like maybe he lived, maybe he died. Who knows, right? Now after like you know reading more analysis and seeing all the like the signs, I think he does get whacked. Um, by who I don't know because again the list is a mile long of who would want to whack Tony. You know, it could have been New York. It could have been someone in his own family. It could have been someone getting revenge for a past like thing that he did, you know? Like who knows? Like there's like the list could be like 10 miles long.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's even like the fringe theories that it's Furio,
Yeah.
where like because okay, so like for that theory, you have to know what happens, but like Furio falls in love with Carmela, and Carmela Carmela is very attracted to Furio, and she wants to act her on her impulses, and she wants to have an affair with him, and she tries to initiate that, and he knows that if if she opens the door, he's going to walk right in, and he can't do that because then he would put his life in danger and possibly hers and her
Mhm.
family's. So he can't do that, and he couldn't even go back to Italy after having the affair. So he just leaves and goes back to Italy just to like live out his days because he just made the right call where he was like, I don't want to get into hot water with this, so I'm going to remove myself from the situation. Um, but the theory is that he like he goes he goes back for Carmela, and he realizes that the only way that he could be with Carmela is if he kills Tony. So that's that theory. I think that's the least credible theory. I don't think that like could it happen? Yeah, but I think that's the least likely of who killed Tony.
Yeah.
Another is the other big one is that it's New York because the guy wearing the members only jacket. I think I think we see him in one of the other episodes.
I don't know.
Is what the theory is, but I'm not totally sure. Um, but yeah, when Phil dies, it's like obviously orchestrated by his right hand guy, Butchie, who realizes that Phil too is unstable and unfit to lead
Yeah.
the mafia. So Butchie usurps the power from him.
Yeah. And basically
And
sets him up to get killed.
right, well, also he sees that what Tony does to one of his guys in his restaurant, which is an
Yeah.
act of which the guy makes a very crass remark about Tony's daughter Meadow, and Tony like nearly
Curb,
kills him.
curb stomps him literally.
Yeah, where he's ready to kill him, and then he turns a gun on Butchie. So like now the Butchie is the new acting boss after Phil is killed.
I think the
It's
strongest
possible
possibility.
that it's possible that Butchie orchestrates the setup.
I think the strongest possibility is that it was a deal between Butchie and Paulie, and the
That makes
reason
sense.
I, and I'm not 100% married to this, but I think this is like it makes a lot of sense. Is so in the previous episodes when New York is planning the hits on the New Jersey family, they meet in a barber shop and they're kind of discussing who's going to get whacked. They want to just kill management. So, they're like Tony Soprano, Silvio Dante, and we think Bobby Bacala. And then like someone says like, "Well, what about Paulie Walnuts?" And they're like, "No, just management." So right there, okay, like they're not going to kill Paulie. Well, Paulie's pretty high up, so why are they not killing Paulie? But whatever,
Mhm.
okay. So they're meeting in a barber shop. Later on in the same episode, Paulie
Well,
shows up to the pork store
well,
with a
also, Paulie's a soldier.
right. Well, but still, he's not only a soldier; he's also a capo.
Mm,
He's got his own crew, so
that's
he's
true.
fairly high up. He's not just like some random soldier on the street.
Right.
He's in Tony's inner circle basically.
Yes.
So Paulie later shows up at the pork store with a box of barber scissors.
Yes.
And he's like, "Oh, here." He's just like giving them away for free, like which whatever. Okay, maybe he got them from one of his people on the street. But it's interesting that they show them meeting in a barber shop and not discussing the killing everybody except for Paulie, and then he shows up with barber scissors later
Right.
on. So it's like, okay, well, there's something going on there, maybe possibly. Um, so maybe it was some kind of deal between Butchie and Paulie, like, get rid of Tony because he's like unstable and causes more instability, and somebody else will take over the New Jersey family, and we'll go back to business as usual, and that's it. Who
Mm.
knows? Maybe it was someone that was like a hitman that had been following Tony and didn't realize that the war was over and was like, okay, well, I'm gonna whack him because nobody told me not to. You know,
Right.
it could be anything. Who knows?
But the interesting thing is how would they well one of the guys in Tony's crew is Patsy Parisi, and what is it like in the first? Is it the first episode that Tony kills his brother?
No, Tony kills his brother in season two.
That's right.
Because his brother Philly was one of Junior's crew, and he was like talking at a school about what happened between Junior and Tony and what happened between Tony and his mother, and so he needed to go. They later bring on Patsy, the twin brother of Philly, to be part of to the Soprano crew. But Patsy kind of always has this like underlying like, I know my brother was whacked by Tony, and like it's a whole thing. Like they kind of like apply that it's like buried in the one episode, like that Tony's like you're done with that, right? You buried it, you're done. And like Patsy knows like, okay, what answer am I going to give here? If I say the wrong thing, I'm going to get whacked too. So he's like, yeah, I buried it, it's fine.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think Patsy actually does bury it, because by the end of the series, like Patsy's son and Meadow are engaged. So I don't think Patsy would kill his son's father-in-law, especially because he knows like he's going to be moving up in the ranks. His son's going to be married to the boss's daughter. That's like huge. So I
Yeah.
think I
That
don't
would
think Patsy had anything to do with it.
well, he could possibly well, I mean, he could have been the guy who tipped them off that they would be at Holston's, because the only way that anyone would know where they went to dinner is if they were in the house or had some connection to the house,
That's true.
because they only decide to go to the diner about an hour before they go.
Yep.
So like, because like Carmela's in the middle of making dinner, she's like getting ready to make dinner, and they just decide, oh, let's just go to the diner.
Well, no,
Like,
Carmela can't make dinner because she's got like meetings with some like for
that's
her new
right.
house that
That's what
she's
it is.
building.
My apologies, people in
Yeah.
digital media device land. I'm gonna be roasted in the comments, so that's fine. I
Watch.
can I can take it. I can take the heat. Give me what you got. It's good for the algorithm. Anyway, moving on. So so they end up deciding that on impulse that they're going to go to the diner, and they're not out in the open. They're in the privacy of their own home. So the only other people who would have known about this is AJ's girlfriend, because AJ deals with a lot of issues as Tony's son, and he ends up going to rehab, and he meets this girl, Rhiannon from his rehab clinic, and Rhiannon, I forget, she says that she's bulimic or whatever, but like she doesn't
Yeah.
seem to have any real issues at all, and she kind of just latches onto him immediately.
Well,
And
he knew Rhiannon before, though.
yes, he did.
Yeah.
But but they make a connection, they start dating and everything. But in the salon or the barber shop where they're having the meeting, the model on the pictures is Rhiannon.
But she's also a model, though, so that
She
could be
is
just a
also a
coincidence.
model. It could be a coincidence.
And also, like AJ takes her to the safe house down the shore. Like, why not whack Tony there?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So I don't think Rhiannon had anything to do with it.
But yeah,
I
the
think,
theory is that she's the setup girl because when when they make the decision to go to Holston's, her ears perk up
yeah,
and she's like all of a sudden. The theory is that she starts looking attentively all of a sudden.
yeah,
And I don't know for sure what happens, but that's a theory that she's the one who somehow she has a connection to Butchie. Like she's a niece of somebody or something, I don't know. But that's the theory, is that she's the setup girl.
yeah,
I don't know if that's true, but it holds water. The other one could possibly be Patsy Parisi, who never really buried the hatchet on that, and just maybe he had some kind of alliance with Butchie or something like that, or like him and Paulie discussed what they might do, or like Paulie tips him up and says, "Hey, they might go ahead with getting rid of T."
yeah,
Oh, okay. So just be on the lookout. And well, what could I do? Okay, well, if you find something out, because your son's dating Meadow, so if you find something out, you know, make an anonymous call or whatever, or like maybe Patsy just can't let it go, and he does still want revenge for his brother Philly. So Meadow could potentially off screen call her fiance and just say, "Oh, or her fiance could call and just say, "Oh, hey, do you want to go out for dinner tonight?" "Oh, no, sorry, we're going to Holston's tonight."
yeah,
Um, you know, but I'll see you later, okay? And then it's as easy as that. He has a conversation with his father. So is she coming over? No, they're going to go to Holston's. Oh, all right, interesting. Makes a quick phone call, and then that's how that happened. So it's to me, it's one of those two theories but I really don't know.
yeah, yeah. I don't know either. It's I think, because also, like Paul, like my whole thing with Paulie is that when they tell him that they're gonna, like, when they're gonna whack Phil Leotardo and stuff, Paulie like has this like huge reaction. He's like, no, well, like, what do you mean? Like, does T know about this? Like, so maybe like because he was already, like, the wheels were already starting to roll with him, and they already contacted him. You
Mm.
know, who knows? I mean, I think that's like the beauty of it, is that there can be so many theories about it. That it was left vague for the fans to ponder. You know, I and I know a lot of people didn't like that when it first came out, but I think it really works. I think it makes the scene better.
Over time, I have grown to enjoy this, and like speculating about the theory is more fun than knowing exactly what happened.
Right.
So even though we all know at this point that yes, Tony dies, no, he doesn't get arrested by the Fed or anything, he dies. It's speculating as to how it happens is a lot of fun in itself.
Yes.
But I think that's all we got to say about this show, just because we don't have 5 hours.
Yeah. We could go on and on and on until both of us had no voice left, and there would still be more to say.
Oh
So,
yeah. But yeah, this is The Sopranos, everybody. I don't know what else there really is to say about this thing. If you want to let us know what your theory is, tell us in the comments and do all those things.
yeah,
But if, but all I can really say is you got to watch this damn show.
you got to watch it. It is a masterpiece in every sense of the word.
Yeah.
So it's just it's amazing.
All right. Well, I got nothing else to say. This has been Why Does This Exist? I have been Chris.
And I've been Rob.
And remember, question everything.
Good night, everybody.